History remembers kings and emperors, but few names echo as loudly as his. A young prince from a small kingdom, barely 20 years old, who defied impossible odds. In just over a decade, he would topple the greatest empire the world had ever seen, march his armies across deserts, rivers, and mountains, and carve out a dominion stretching from Greece to India. He was hailed as a god, feared as a conqueror, and followed as a leader who never lost a single battle. Yet behind the glory lies a man consumed by ambition, whose empire crumbled the moment he died. This is the story of Alexander the Great, the boy who dared to dream of ruling the world, and nearly did. Imagine a young man, barely 20 years old, standing before the throne of a small kingdom in northern Greece. His father, King Philip II, had just been assassinated. Rebellions flared, enemies circled, allies wavered. In this chaos, few believed that this youth could even hold on to his crown, let alone reshape the world. Yet this young man was Alexander, the one history remembers as Alexander the Great, who, in just over a decade, would conquer nearly every corner of the ancient world he knew. From his earliest years, Alexander was raised to be extraordinary. His tutor was none other than Aristotle, the greatest philosopher of Greece, who instilled in him knowledge of philosophy, science, and art. But alongside this love of learning, Alexander inherited an insatiable drive for conquest from his father, a warrior king who had transformed Macedonia into a rising military power. When Philip was struck down, Alexander did not falter. He crushed rebellions with merciless speed, razing the proud city of Thebes to the ground to send a chilling message. Resistance would be met with total destruction. Within months, he was master of all Greece. But Greece was not enough. To the east lay the Persian Empire, the greatest power on earth. In 334 BCE, Alexander crossed the narrow strait of the Hellespont with 35,000 men, stepping into Asia for the first time. His opening battle came at the river Granicus. His generals urged caution, but Alexander, riding his beloved horse Bucephalus, plunged headlong into the river, spear in hand, leading his men into the fray. His daring charge shattered the Persian lines. Victory was his, and with it, the loyalty and awe of his soldiers, who saw in him not just a king, but a brother in arms who fought at their side. The following year, Alexander met King Darius III of Persia in person at the Battle of Issus. Darius commanded an army many times larger, yet Alexander did not hesitate. With a brilliant maneuver, he drove a wedge through the Persian center, his spear aimed directly at Darius himself. Overwhelmed by fear, the great king fled the battlefield, abandoning his family. They fell into Alexander's hand, but instead of cruelty, he treated them with honor. It was a masterstroke of politics as well as war. Alexander showed the world he was not just a conqueror, but a ruler. After sweeping through the eastern Mediterranean, Alexander turned to Egypt. The Egyptians, weary of Persian rule, welcomed him as a liberator. At the sacred oasis of Siwa, priests declared him the son of the god Amun. Alexander began to believe he was destined for greatness beyond human measure. On the shores of the Mediterranean, he founded the city of Alexandria, which would become a beacon of learning, home to the great library of Alexandria, a symbol of the cultural fusion he was creating. But his greatest trial came in 331 BCE, at the plain of Gaugamela. Darius returned, this time with an army of over 200,000 men, while Alexander commanded fewer than 50,000. The night before the battle, Alexander slept soundly, while Darius lay awake in fear. At dawn, Alexander unleashed a masterpiece of strategy. His cavalry thrust created a gap in the Persian lines, and once more, he drove straight for Darius. Again, the Persian king fled, and with his flight, the Persian Empire collapsed. Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis fell into Alexander's hands. In a drunken blaze of triumph, Alexander set fire to Persepolis, the heart of Persia, marking the end of an empire that had stood for centuries. Yet Alexander's hunger for conquest was insatiable. With Persia under his control, he pushed eastward, crossing the Hindu Kush into the Indian subcontinent. In 326 BCE, he faced King Porus at the Battle of the Hydaspes. Porus brought war elephants, terrifying beasts that struck fear into men and horses alike. Under torrential rain, the battle raged savagely. Though his army suffered heavy losses, Alexander triumphed. But instead of crushing Porus, he admired his bravery and restored him as ruler, a testament to Alexander's ability to blend ruthlessness with magnanimity. But his men had reached their breaking point. They had marched thousands of miles, fought countless battles, and longed to return home. When Alexander demanded they press on farther east, they refused. For the first time, the king's will was defied. Reluctantly, Alexander turned back. The conqueror who had never known defeat was forced to bow to the limits of human endurance. Back in Babylon, Alexander began planning new campaigns, the conquest of Arabia, perhaps even beyond. But fate had other designs. In 323 BCE, at just 32 years old, he fell gravely ill and died under mysterious circumstances. Some said it was malaria, others typhoid, still others whispered of poison. Whatever the cause, the sudden death of the young king sent shockwaves through the world. His empire, too vast and too new, fractured almost immediately, carved up by his generals. Yet Alexander's legacy endured. He carried Greek culture across continents, sparking the Hellenistic age, a fusion of Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and Indian traditions. Science, art, philosophy, and language flourished in this new world he had forged. Cities like Alexandria stood as monuments to his vision, and through it all, his name lived on, a symbol of ambition without limits. Alexander the Great, a boy from Macedonia who carved out an empire that stretched from Greece to India. Was he a hero or a tyrant? A visionary or a conqueror consumed by ambition? Perhaps he was all of these at once. But one thing is certain, he became a legend, and that legend has echoed across history for over 2,000 years,